I'm Beth from the West Allis Public Library, and welcome to another episode of the Let's Go on Vacation Book Club, where this week we're traveling to the Eiffel Tower in Paris, France. Don't forget to check our Facebook page for our past trips, including Walt Disney World, the Grand Canyon, and the Bermuda Triangle. Today in Where is the Eiffel Tower? We are on Chapter 6, The Fair Below. Down below, most of the exhibitions were finally up and running. More than 61,000 exhibitors displayed products and artwork and performed music, dance, and theater. Although they came from all over the world, more than half of the exhibitors were from France or French colonies. In 1889, France controlled many distant countries. Each was very different and had its own culture. This fair was their chance to show the world how they ate, dressed, and lived. The French colonial expositions were located in the Esplanade des Invalides up the river from the Eiffel Tower. Visitors were given a ticket called the Magic Carpet that allowed them to experience cultures from all over the world. Actors from Indochina, now called Vietnam, put on a show. Dancers from Java performed native dances. Workers and performers lived in villages with houses like the ones in distant Tahiti and Senegal. But the 1889 fair was not just about the French and their colonies. Beautiful tiles adorned a Tunisian palace. Algerians were at work embroidering slippers and weaving baskets. Egyptian donkeys pulled carts. There was even a working English dairy where cows gave fresh milk. Visitors could watch Devonshire cream being made and eat delicious homemade ice cream at small tables. One of the most admired exhibitions was a huge model of Earth, accurately scaled to size. With a diameter of 42 feet, it was exactly 1/1,000,000th the size of the Earth. Like the fair itself, this rotating globe was meant to introduce visitors to the world as a whole. Perfectly measured, countries, cities, bodies of water, mountains, shipping routes, telegraph lines, and a variety of geographical facts were painted on the outside. Visitors were especially excited to see the American exhibits. Thomas Edison's electric lights glittered everywhere. Otis elevators carried passengers to the top of the Eiffel Tower, and now visitors could learn about American culture as well. They could view the newest art from the 255 American painters exhibiting at the fair. Many were especially excited to see the much talked about portraits by John Singer Sargent, who would win a Medal of Honor at the medal ceremony on September 29th. And everyone wanted to try out the telephone display. Alexander Graham Bell had invented the telephone 13 years earlier, but long-distance calling was still in the future. People wondered what it would sound like. Inside the exhibit, visitors found a line of telephones on one wall. Miles away, at the Paris Opera House, telephone receivers were broadcasting live music. The concert could be heard through the phones all the way across the city. It was incredible. But everyone, it seemed, couldn't wait to see Thomas Edison's newest inventions. His exhibit was inside the beautiful 15-acre glass and steel gallery of machines. Hurrying into the gallery, visitors were surrounded by electric lights that blinked, buzzed, and fizzled. Pumps shuddered and thumped. Engines pounded and clanked. Some people stopped to inspect the new machines, but most rushed to try out Edison's phonograph. Earphones were passed from visitor to visitor. Each person was allowed 3 minutes to listen to the national anthems of France and the United States. But America didn't just bring inventions and art. They also brought Buffalo Bill and Annie Oakley. On the other side of the river, beyond the Louvre Museum, Buffalo Bill Cody was putting on his very popular Wild West show. During the 1800s, Americans had been moving west. Before the first cross-country railroad was completed in 1869, pioneers traveled in covered wagons. Many American Indian tribes hunted buffalo. Mail was delivered by the Pony Express, on horseback or in wagons. The western plains were wild and dangerous. In a Paris amphitheater, Buffalo Bill's touring show recreated the Wild West, or at least the Wild West as white Americans like to picture it. Plains Indians riding bareback did battle with Pony Express messengers. Led by Buffalo Bill, cowboys on horseback shouted and raised their rifles as they raced to save the passengers on the wagon train. Annie Oakley, the show's world-famous 5-foot-tall sharpshooter, demonstrated why she was known as Little Sure Shot. She was able to shoot a cigar out of her husband's mouth. That night, as visitors on both sides of the Seine left the fairground, they stopped and looked up. The tower was blazing with light. The spotlight was spinning colors through the sky. The fountains below it were dancing. In September, officials agreed to keep the fair open for an extra week. It would close exactly 3 months after it opened. The 1889 Exposition Universelle had been a huge success. Chapter 7. What can you do with a tower? Paris officials wanted to take down the tower when the fair closed. That had been the plan from the start. The city owned the land it was built on, and the city wanted it back. Gustave, on the other hand, hoped the tower would stand forever. An agreement was finally signed. His tower would remain where it was until 1909. That was better, but not good enough for Gustave. He now had 20 years to figure out how to make the tower a permanent landmark, one that would stand for hundreds of years. Gustave soon came up with a plan. At the time, people used telegraphs to send messages, long distances over land. At sea, ships in trouble used Morse code. Messages were carried through wires and cables under the ocean. But something new was happening. An inventor named Marconi was working on a way to send messages long distance through the air on radio waves. His invention did not use wires. Messages would be transmitted and received using an antenna. Wireless radio waves fascinated Gustave. He had been using his tower to conduct weather experiments. Why not use it to experiment with radio waves? Gustave worked hard. He brought in an inventor named Eugene Ducredet to help. They raised an antenna above the 3rd floor. Finally, on November 5th, 1898, a signal was sent from the tower and picked up at the Parthenon, about 3 miles away. It was picked up at the Pantheon, about 3 miles away. Still, Paris officials insisted the tower had to be taken down in 1909. Did that happen? Gustave was desperate. How could he convince officials to let his tower stand? Hadn't they been impressed with his radio work? Then, Gustave had a brainstorm. Wasn't the French military doing wireless experiments? Didn't it need a better way to transmit and receive messages? Gustave went to the military. Okay, the officials said. They'd agreed to try using the tower for some of their experiments. The military installed better and higher antennas. It worked. They could send clearer messages and orders to more distant soldiers and sailors. The military was convinced. Now Gustave had to convince the Paris officials. It took time, but eventually, on January 1st, 1910, an agreement to save the Eiffel Tower was signed. Over Over the years, new ways to use radio waves were discovered. More advanced wireless devices were invented. By 1920, a machine called the radio could broadcast programs that people listened to from far away. In the mid-20th century, television began broadcasting programs that people could see as well as hear. The tower was becoming more and more important. Higher antennas were added to help send and receive signals. Today, 120 antennas at the top of the Eiffel Tower help send messages to the farthest points on the globe. Here's, you see a drawing. That's the antennas at the top of the Eiffel Tower. In September 1914, Europe was fighting World War I. German troops had taken over Belgium. They were fighting to capture France. As Germans moved closer to Paris, French soldiers fought one of the most important battles of the war. It took place at the Marne River, 30 miles from Paris. The tower was closed to the public during the war, but the antennas continued to be used. As the battle raged on, messages to French troops were being transmitted from the top of the tower. Also, the tower's transmitters were able to pick up German messages. This helped the French soldiers know what the enemy was up to. The Battle of Marne lasted about a week. When it was over, the Germans retreated. Paris was safe. In 1918, Germany surrendered, ending World War I. A little more than 20 years later, Germany again went to war against many countries in Europe, including France. In 1940, German Nazi soldiers moved in the center of Paris to occupy the city. It was a terrible time for France. At the Eiffel Tower, a French fireman was forced to take down the national flag of France. Then the Nazis raised their own flag. However, by 1944, Adolf Hitler, the Nazi leader, could see that Germany was losing the war. So he called in General Dietrich von Schlotitz to the German commander. He was the German commander and governor of occupied Paris. Hitler gave him an order. Before Paris was free again, von Schlotitz must reduce the city to rubble. No famous building or monument could be left standing. Notre Dame Cathedral, the Louvre Museum, the Arc de Triomphe, the Eiffel Tower, and other beloved Parisian landmarks must be blown up. Under no circumstances should von Schlotitz leave Paris without destroying it. Yikes. The battle to free Paris from the Germans began in August 1944. The Allied troops, Americans and British, were moving closer and closer to Paris. Soon, Soon, they would arrive and liberate the city. Hitler ordered that explosives be put in place around Paris, on bridges, buildings, and monuments. Von Schlotitz followed these orders, but he did not obey Hitler's final command. He never pushed the buttons that would have fired the explosives. On August 24th, French and American troops moved into Paris. Parisians took up guns and rushed into the streets to help win back their city. The Germans surrendered on August 25th, 1944. Von Schlotitz had plenty of time and opportunity to destroy Paris. Why instead did he save the city? His reasons are still unclear. There are many different theories. Von Schlotitz himself stated, "If for the first time I had disobeyed, it was because I knew that Hitler was insane." His son maintained that his father understood there was no reason to take down the buildings and chose to save the city. French people found that impossible to believe. Von Schlotitz had killed many Parisians. He had no love for their city. So perhaps somewhere in Paris, a Parisian stopped von Schlotitz from that horrible act. With Paris now freed, The moment had come to pull down the hated Nazi flag from the Eiffel Tower. The same man who had removed the French flag in 1940 was chosen to put up the tricolor of blue, white, and red. But all French flags had been destroyed by the Nazis during the war, so he ended up making a three-colored flag out of sheets, then climbed up to the top of the tower and raised the giant banner. The Eiffel Tower stood proud once more, truly a symbol of France's liberty. Okay, that's where we'll stop for today. That was a heavy chapter. Okay, so join us tomorrow night for the final episode in our trip to France in the Where's the Eiffel Tower book in our Let's Go on Vacation book club. Bye.